When I saw my wife walking out of that rooftop bar in downtown Lancaster at 1 in the morning, holding hands with a man I'd never seen before, something inside me shattered into 1,000 pieces. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Robin, I'm 33 years old, and for the last 8 years I thought I was a happily married man. At least that's what I believed. My wife Melinda opened her own coffee shop 5 years ago, and I was endlessly proud of her. I work as a yacht captain, often going out to sea for several days at a time, but I always came home to our 2 children and our orange cat Mars, who would greet me with loud purring. Everything started changing about 6 months ago. Melinda began staying late after the coffee shop closed. At first I didn't think much of it, business is business, right? But then came the phone calls that made her step outside. When she'd come back in she seemed different somehow, like she was living in 2 worlds simultaneously. The turning point came when I returned from a voyage 3 days early. That evening, Melinda said she was going to a friend's house who needed support. Something in her voice set off alarm bells. I'm not proud of what I did next, but my instinct was screaming that something wasn't right. I hired a private detective named Marcus. He was in his 50s, face weathered and lined, but eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You're going to see things you don't want to see," he warned me. I nodded. I needed the truth, however brutal it might be. Marcus worked fast. Within a week, he handed me a report that made the ground disappear from under my feet. Melinda had been meeting with a man named Edward, a cosmetologist from a trendy salon downtown. They'd met by chance on the street 3 months ago when he helped her pick up a box of coffee beans she dropped. Sounds like the plot of a cheap movie, but sometimes life is more banal than fiction. The detective provided photographs. They were meeting at that rooftop bar with panoramic windows overlooking the entire city. Embracing. Kissing. I stared at those images and couldn't recognize my wife. This was some other Melinda I didn't know. The worst was yet to come. 2 weeks after I got the evidence, Melinda announced news that should have been the happiest in our lives. She was pregnant. A 3rd child. I hugged her, trying to smile, but inside everything was screaming with pain. Whose child was this? Mine. Or that man's from the photographs. I couldn't continue like this. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat across from Melinda in our kitchen. Mars jumped onto my lap as if sensing something important was about to happen. "I need the truth," I said quietly. "About Edward." Melinda's face changed. First surprise, then fear, then tears. She didn't deny it. Everything poured out in a flood: how lonely she'd been when I was at sea, how Edward appeared at a moment when things were particularly difficult, how it all started innocently, and then, "Is the baby his?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from her eyes. She nodded, sobbing. The following days were the darkest of my life. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. My children would run up to me with their bright smiles, completely unaware that their world was crumbling. Mars would curl up next to me at night, and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our 8 years together, searching for signs I'd missed. But I had a plan forming. Marcus helped me learn more about Edward. It turned out my rival was married. His wife Karen didn't even suspect the affair. Moreover, they had 2 children about the same age as ours. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here were 2 families, living parallel lives, completely unaware that they were connected by betrayal. Edward worked at an upscale salon where wealthy clients paid hundreds of dollars for treatments. He drove a nice car, lived in a nice house, had a nice life. And he was willing to risk it all for what? Excitement? An ego boost? I needed to understand. I spent a week watching Edward from a distance. Marcus had given me his schedule, his habits, his routines. I saw him drop his kids off at school, kiss his wife goodbye, go to work. He looked so normal, so ordinary. There was nothing special about him. That made it worse somehow. Melinda had risked everything we'd built for someone so unremarkable. But then she did something I'll never forget. One afternoon, I followed Melinda to one of their meetings. I watched from my car as she arrived at the rooftop bar, her face lighting up when she saw Edward waiting. They embraced like lovers in a movie and I felt physically sick. But I kept watching. They ordered drinks, sat close together, and I could see them talking intensely. At one point, Edward placed his hand on her stomach, my wife's stomach, where a child was growing. The gesture was so intimate, so possessive, that I had to grip the steering wheel to keep from storming in there. That's when I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just confront Melinda. That would be too simple, too easy. She'd cry, apologize, maybe we'd go to counseling, and nothing would really change. No, I needed something more. Something that would make her understand the depth of what she'd destroyed. I met Karen at a small cafe on the outskirts of Lancaster on a gray Tuesday morning. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and laugh lines that suggested she smiled often. Those lines would deepen with pain soon, and I hated that I was the messenger. But Karen deserved the truth just as I had. I showed her the evidence. Photographs, timestamps, locations. I watched her face go through the same journey mine had: disbelief, shock, denial, and finally devastating acceptance. She sat there for a long moment, staring at the photos, her coffee growing cold. "How long?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "3 months that we know of," I replied. She nodded slowly, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Thank you for telling me. I know this couldn't have been easy. What will you do?" I asked. She looked up at me with eyes that had suddenly hardened. "I'm going to take care of my children. And I'm going to make sure Edward understands what he's lost." We sat there for another hour, two strangers bonded by betrayal, planning our next moves. Karen was smarter than I'd expected. She didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. She wanted Edward to face the consequences of his choices in a way that would truly hurt. Within a week, Karen had filed for divorce. But before she did something brilliant. She invited both sets of parents over for dinner, hers and Edward's. In front of everyone he cared about, she calmly explained what had been happening, showed them evidence, and announced she was taking the children and moving back to her parents' home in another state. Edward's mother broke down crying. His father looked at him with such disappointment that even I, watching from afar as Marcus reported back, felt a twinge of sympathy. But that wasn't the end of Karen's plan. She worked in the same industry as Edward, knew all the same people, attended the same professional events. She didn't spread rumors, she didn't have to. She simply told the truth when asked why she was divorcing. In an industry built on image and trust, Edward's reputation began to crumble. What I saw next turned everything upside down. Edward showed up at Melinda's coffee shop. I was watching from across the street, having taken a few days off work to monitor the situation. He looked terrible, unshaven, disheveled, desperate. Through the window, I could see him pleading with Melinda, gesturing frantically. But Melinda's face was cold, closed off. She shook her head and turned away from him. That's when Edward did something that changed the trajectory of everything. He broke down completely right there in the coffee shop in front of all her customers and staff. Fell to his knees, sobbing, begging. Melinda looked horrified and embarrassed. 2 of her employees had to help escort him out. I called Marcus. "Get me everything on Edward's life right now." Everything. What we discovered was that Edward's world was imploding. Karen had taken the children and moved 3 states away. The divorce was proceeding rapidly, and Karen's family, who were well connected in Lancaster, had made sure everyone knew why. Edward's client list at the salon had shrunk by 60%. His landlord, who happened to be friends with Karen's father, had given him notice to vacate his apartment. His own parents had stopped speaking to him. And here's where the story gets truly insane. Edward had been in debt. Serious debt. Credit cards maxed out, loans from friends and family. He'd been living well beyond his means, trying to maintain an image of success. Karen, discovering the affair, had accelerated everything. She'd frozen their joint accounts, taken her name off shared credit cards, left him with all the debt. Melinda didn't know any of this. She'd been seeing Edward at his carefully curated best, the successful cosmetologist with the nice car and confident smile. She had no idea he was drowning financially and emotionally. I thought it couldn't get worse, but Melinda came home that night shaken. She sat down at our kitchen table, and I could see she'd been crying. Our kids were at her parents' house for the night, so it was just us. "Something happened today," she started, her voice trembling. I said nothing, just waited. Edward came to the shop. He was different, desperate. He said his wife found out about us and she's taking everything. His kids, his home, his reputation. He begged me to leave you, to come away with him, start fresh somewhere else. I felt cold fury rising in my chest. "And what did you tell him?" She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in months: clarity. "I told him to leave. I told him I never wanted to see him again." "Why?" I asked. "You're carrying his child. You risked our marriage for him. Why push him away now?" And this is the moment I realized that everything she'd been saying was a lie. Not about the affair, that was real. But about her feelings, her motivations, everything. Melinda took a shaky breath. Because I finally saw him clearly. When Karen found out, when his perfect life started falling apart, he didn't fight for me. He fought for himself. He came to me not because he loves me, but because he needed someone to save him from the consequences of his own actions. And I realized I was doing the same thing. I wasn't running to Edward because I loved him. I was running from the fear of being alone when you were at sea, from the pressure of managing the business, from the responsibility of being a mother and wife. He was an escape, not a solution. The confession hung in the air between us. Mars meowed softly from his perch on the windowsill, as if commenting on the absurdity of human behavior. I don't love him, Robin, Melinda continued, tears streaming down her face. I don't think I ever did. And that makes what I did so much worse. I destroyed us for nothing. For a fantasy that was never real. I sat there processing this revelation. Part of me wanted to rage, to throw her words back in her face. But another part, a calculating part one didn't know I possessed, saw an opportunity. You're going to have his child, I said flatly. That's very real. I know. And I'll have to live with that every day. But Robin, if there's any chance, any way I can make this right. There isn't, I interrupted. You can't unmake your choices, Melinda. But I can make mine. Her face crumpled. You want a divorce? I did, I admitted. I had Marcus gather evidence. I was ready to take you for everything in court. I was going to make sure everyone knew what you'd done, destroy your reputation like Edward's was destroyed. I wanted you to hurt like I was hurting. I deserve that, she whispered. You do, I agreed. But revenge is a strange thing. I've spent weeks planning, scheming, thinking about all the ways I could make you pay. And then I realized something. The worst revenge isn't destroying you. It's making you live with what you've done, every single day, knowing what you lost and what you chose. Before I continue, please pause the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new interesting stories. Thank you. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to separate. Not divorce, not yet. You're going to move into your parents' place for now. You'll continue running the coffee shop until the baby is born, and then we'll reassess. I'll keep the kids here with me most of the time, but you'll have regular visitation. But I'm not finished, I said, turning to face her. You're going to tell everyone, our friends, our families, your employees, the truth about the affair and the pregnancy. All of it. No sugarcoating, no excuses. You're going to own what you did. Melinda nodded, pale but accepting. And Edward, I continued, you're going to make sure he understands that he has no claim on this child. No contact, no rights, nothing. If he tries to reach out, you'll get a restraining order. He won't, Melinda said quietly. When he left today, he said he was leaving Lancaster. Moving somewhere he could start over. Good, I thought. One problem solving itself. The following weeks were a blur of difficult conversations and painful adjustments. Telling our children was the hardest thing I've ever done. Our oldest, Cameron, who was 7, cried and asked if it was his fault. Our daughter, Sophie, who was 5, just looked confused and kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Mommy and Daddy need some time apart, I explained, holding them both close. But we both love you very much, and that will never change. Mars seemed to sense the change in our household too. He'd wander from room to room, meowing plaintively, searching for Melinda. I'd find him sleeping on her side of the bed, as if keeping it warm for her return. Melinda kept her word. She told everyone the truth. I watched from a distance as her world contracted. Some friends stood by her, but many didn't. Her business took a hit. People didn't want to support someone who cheated on their husband. She had to let go of 2 employees and cut back her hours. But something strange happened. As I watched Melinda suffer the consequences of her actions, I found my anger slowly transforming into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding maybe? Or perhaps just exhaustion. Revenge, I was learning, was tiresome. Marcus called me about 6 weeks into our separation. I've been tracking Edward's movements like you asked. Thought you should know, he attempted to contact Melinda 3 more times. She blocked him every time. Last week he really did leave town. Moved to Oregon apparently. Starting over at some small salon. And Karen? Doing well from what I can tell. She got a good job in her hometown, the kids are adjusting. She's even started dating someone, a widower with kids of his own. I thanked Marcus and ended the call. It was time to make a decision about my own future. I'd achieved what I set out to do. Melinda was facing consequences. Edward had lost everything, and I had protected myself financially through the offshore account Marcus had helped me set up. My yacht captain salary was solid middle-class income, and I'd made sure that money was secure regardless of what happened with the divorce. But what did I actually want? Did I want to spend the rest of my life angry? Did I want my children growing up in a broken home, shuttling between parents who couldn't stand to be in the same room? The answer came unexpectedly one evening when I was putting Sophie to bed. She looked up at me with her big brown eyes, Melinda's eyes, and asked, "Daddy, when the new baby comes, will they live with us or with Mommy?" I froze. In all my planning and scheming, I hadn't really thought about the practicalities of Melinda's pregnancy. In a few months there would be another child. A child who was genetically Edward's but would carry our last name, grow up with my children as siblings. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," I admitted. "I hope they live here," Sophie said matter-of-factly, "so I can be a big sister properly." That night I called Melinda. "We need to talk. About everything." We met the next day at a neutral location, a park bench overlooking the Lancaster River. It was early autumn, leaves just starting to turn, the air carrying that crisp hint of coming winter. Melinda was showing now, her pregnancy obvious under her loose sweater. "I've been thinking," I started, "about what happens after the baby is born." Melinda nodded, waiting. "I've spent the last 2 months making you pay for what you did," I continued. "And you have paid. You've lost friends, business, your home, your reputation. You've lived with the shame and guilt every day. But I'm tired, Melinda. I'm tired of being angry, tired of planning revenge, tired of pretending I don't care." "What are you saying?" she asked carefully. "I'm saying that maybe the cruelest revenge of all is forgiveness. Not the easy kind, not pretending it never happened. But real forgiveness that comes with strings attached, with boundaries, with the understanding that things will never be the same but could be something new." Tears welled in Melinda's eyes. "I don't deserve that." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But our children deserve parents who can be in the same room without hatred. This baby," I gestured to her stomach, "deserves a chance at a normal life, not one tainted by the circumstances of their conception." "Robin, Let me finish," I interrupted. "If we're going to do this, truly do this, there have to be rules. Complete transparency, I get access to your phone, your accounts, everything. Counseling, for both of us individually and together. You rebuild your life from the ground up, prove that you can be the person you claim you want to be. And most importantly, you have to live every day knowing that I know, remembering what you did and what it cost us. That's my revenge, making you earn back what you threw away, knowing you might never fully succeed." And the ending of this story surprised even me. Melinda agreed to every condition. She moved back into the house a month later, but into the guest room. She attended therapy 3 times a week. She showed me every text message, every email, every conversation. She rebuilt the coffee shop slowly with humility and hard work. When Emily was born, that's what we named her, I was there in the delivery room. I held that tiny human who looked nothing like me and everything like her biological father, and I made a choice. This child didn't ask to be born into this complicated mess. She deserved love, stability, protection. The first few months were the hardest. Every time I looked at Emily, I was reminded of the betrayal. But I was also reminded of something else, that I was choosing to be the bigger person not for Melinda but for myself. Revenge had consumed enough of my life. Our friends and family had mixed reactions to our reconciliation. My parents thought I was making a huge mistake. "She'll just do it again," my mother warned. Melinda's parents were grateful but cautious. Our friends split into camps, some admiring my capacity for forgiveness, others thinking I was weak or foolish. But what others thought didn't matter. What mattered was that Cameron and Sophie had their mother back, and they had a baby sister they adored. What mattered was that Mars finally stopped searching the house for Melinda, content to curl up with whoever would pet him. What mattered was that slowly, painfully, we were building something new from the ruins of what we'd had. What happened after that is worth hearing. Edward tried to contact Melinda one final time, about 6 months after Emily was born. He sent a letter to the coffee shop, saying he'd gotten sober, gone to therapy, and wanted to meet his daughter. Melinda showed me the letter immediately. "What do you think?" she asked. I think," I said carefully, "that Emily's biological father signed away any rights when he ran away to Oregon. I think he had his chance to step up and chose not to. And I think that you and I need to decide together what's best for her." We decided that Edward would have no contact. Not out of spite but out of protection. Emily had a family, complicated as it was. She didn't need the confusion of another parent figure who'd already proven unreliable. Edward never contacted us again. Last I heard from Marcus, who I still occasionally kept in touch with, Edward had remarried in Oregon. His new wife didn't know about Emily, about the affair, about any of it. He'd truly started over, erasing his past. Melinda's coffee shop slowly recovered. She rebranded it, created a new mission focused on community and second chances. Ironically, her honesty about her mistakes resonated with people. She became known as someone who'd fallen and gotten back up, and customers respected that. As for us, our marriage would never be what it once was. That innocent trust was gone forever and we both knew it. But we built something else, a partnership based on brutal honesty, hard work, and commitment to our children. Some days were better than others. Some days I'd look at her and feel the old anger rise up. Other days I'd see her with our kids and remember why I fell in love with her in the first place. Wait for the ending, it'll make you see everything differently. A year after Emily was born, Melinda sat me down one evening after the kids were in bed. Mars was purring in his usual spot on the windowsill, and the house was quiet. "I have something for you," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside were legal documents. She'd transferred ownership of the coffee shop entirely to herself and had taken out a life insurance policy with me and the children as beneficiaries. She'd also written something, a detailed letter explaining everything that had happened from her perspective, taking full responsibility, exonerating me of any wrongdoing. "Why?" I asked, confused. "Because you gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. And I want you to know that I understand the value of what you gave up, what you chose to forgive. This letter is for the kids, for when they're older and have questions. I want them to know the truth, but I also want them to know that their father is the bravest, most compassionate man I've ever known." I read the letter, tears blurring my vision. It was raw, honest, painful. It detailed her loneliness, her poor choices, her regrets. But it also spoke of my response, my decision to prioritize the children, my willingness to build something new from the ashes. You won't guess how this all ends. 3 years after the affair, Melinda and I renewed our vows. Not the original ones, we couldn't pretend the betrayal never happened. Instead, we wrote new vows, honest ones. I promised to continue choosing forgiveness even when it was hard. She promised to earn my trust every single day for the rest of her life. Our families came to the small ceremony in our backyard. Cameron, now 10, and Sophie, now 8, stood as our attendants. Emily, 3 years old and full of personality, was the flower girl. Mars watched from the window, probably wondering what all the fuss was about. During the ceremony, I looked at Melinda and thought about the journey we'd taken. From that night I saw her leaving the rooftop bar, through the investigation, the confrontation, the separation, the slow reconciliation to this moment. It hadn't been easy. It had been, in fact, the hardest thing I'd ever done. But somewhere along the way I'd learned something valuable. Revenge comes in many forms. Sometimes it's destruction. Sometimes it's walking away. But sometimes, and this is the strangest revenge of all, it's choosing to build something better from the rubble, making someone live with their choices while simultaneously giving them the chance to be better than those choices. Melinda would carry the weight of what she'd done for the rest of her life. Every time she looked at Emily, she'd remember. Every time she saw me with our children, she'd think about what she almost destroyed. That was her punishment, not hatred, not abandonment, but the daily reminder of grace she didn't deserve. And me? I got to be the hero of my own story. Not by destroying her, but by being strong enough to rebuild. I showed my children that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but that those mistakes don't have to define everything that comes after. I taught them about forgiveness, about second chances, about choosing love even when you have every reason to choose hate. Was it the right choice? I don't know. Some days I think yes, absolutely. Other days I wonder if I was a fool. But I made the choice for me, for my children, and for the man I wanted to be. Marcus retired last year. Before he did, he called me one last time. "That thing you did," he said, "not many people could do that. Most people choose the easy revenge. You chose the hard path. Was it revenge?" I asked. "I'm still not sure." He laughed. "The best revenge is living well, isn't it? Making them watch you be better than they made you, making them see what they almost lost. Yeah, I'd say that's revenge. Just not the kind most people think of." Life in Lancaster continued. I still captain yachts, still go out to sea for days at a time. But now when I come home, Melinda is there, and she's the woman I'm choosing to build a life with, not the woman I once thought I married, but someone new. Someone who earned her place through years of hard work and dedication. Emily is 5 now and has no idea that I'm not her biological father. We'll tell her someday when she's old enough to understand. We'll use Melinda's letter, explain everything honestly. But for now, she's just my daughter as much as Cameron and Sophie are my children. Edward never contacted us again. His past stayed buried in Oregon, a secret he kept from his new life. Karen remarried and sent us a Christmas card last year. Apparently she and her new husband are expecting a baby. Life moved on for everyone. Looking back, I realized that my revenge was perfect because it wasn't really revenge at all. It was something more complex, more nuanced. I took the worst moment of my life and transformed it into a testament to human resilience and forgiveness. I made Melinda face consequences, yes, but I also gave her the chance to prove she could be better. And in doing so, I proved something to myself, that I was strong enough to choose the hard path, brave enough to risk being hurt again, and wise enough to know that sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't destruction, but reconstruction. Our story won't make sense to everyone. Some people will think I was weak. Others might think I was a saint. I'm neither. I'm just a man who made a choice, who decided that the best revenge against betrayal wasn't to become a worse person, but to become a better one. And every night, when I tuck my 3 children into bed, when Mars curls up next to me, when Melinda and I sit together in comfortable silence or difficult conversation, I know I made the right choice. Not the easy one, not the one people expected, but the right one for us. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.